Welcome to the latest episode of 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the 5 Reasons YouTube channel. Also, check out Off the Floor. If you're not subscribed to Off the Floor, what you missed last night was my 45-minute rant. We had more than 120 people actually listening to that. I better look back and see what I actually said. Anyway, we're doing a lot of exclusive content in Off the Floor. And the way that you get on there is that you click on the link that's in the description here, and you'll bypass the $1 Apple upcharge. You just pay $2.99 a month. You get access to 11 different channels, plus our exclusive stage shows. So make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. Also, check out the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network, includes a special sponsor of this particular podcast, Underdog. Use the code 5, F-I-V-E. You'll get to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Underdog, more than 5 million players already. Find out why they use Underdog. Again, you can go up. You can play Jimmy Butler's points higher. You cannot play Jimmy Butler trade rumors up or down at this point, but plenty of other stuff that you can do on the app. Download it from the Google Play Store, the Apple App Store, and start playing today. I'm sorry. Here's the disclaimer. You must be at least 18 or 19 in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 in Colorado for some games, 21 or over in Massachusetts, Arizona, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. If you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. And now, today's episode.
Yeah. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the flow playing, got it all banned. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
All right, here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at 5 Reasons Sports. Got Brady Hawk. You can follow him at Brady Hawk 305. We've got basketball tonight. Miami Heat hosting the Toronto Raptors, who are without Scotty Barnes. This is one of the 2 games that was added because the Heat did not make the in-season tournament. And so you've got Toronto at home tonight, and then they go to Detroit on Monday. Now, we're going to try to talk basketball today, but I got to get this out of the way first, obviously, because all the conversation on the various social media platforms and everywhere else has been about Jimmy Butler's future with the Miami Heat. We're going to talk about Jimmy Butler's present right now. We're going to talk in a basketball terms, Brady and I today. But I will address this because I handled this for about 45 minutes on the stage show yesterday. This is my view on the Butler situation as it is, okay? And I know all the parties involved. I know Shams. I know Bernie. I obviously communicate with the Heat. And I don't think any of this matters. I mean, I know it's great for clicks, and we did a big podcast on it and all the rest of it, but in my view, and based on the text that I was getting last night, nothing has really changed from what we talked about over the summer. This is still hanging over the Heat. It's going to until the trade deadline or until they give an extension or don't give an extension to Jimmy Butler this summer. There are 3 basic options here. One is you wait till the end of the season and he opts in. You wait till the end of the season and he opts out. Or you trade him before the deadline in February, before he has a chance to do either. Okay, and based on what you think he's going to do this offseason may influence whether or not a trade is made, also the market that's out there and all the rest of this. Which teams Jimmy is interested in, if Bernie even leaked that out there, as Shams said and Bernie has denied, does not really matter. The only thing that matters, okay, is a team out there willing to give Jimmy what the Heat so far to this point have not been willing to give him, which is a max extension. Until it comes out that one of those teams is trying to get Jimmy Butler or trying to clear the cap space for Jimmy Butler this offseason, there's only a very short number of teams. There's a handful of teams, not even a handful, that have cap space this summer of any significance. And I think only 2 of them would have enough to even accommodate Jimmy at this stage. Okay, they could clear more. Until we hear that, it doesn't matter where he might want to go or any of these kinds of things until these teams again say that they're willing to give him what is the most important thing to him right now, which is to be paid. That's what he wants, okay? And all the rest of this is noise. Now, Brady, I'll let you get in on that part. We're going to talk about the basketball part of this. Uh, this was amusing yesterday, I guess. I know Bernie doesn't like Shams. I've had this conversation with Bernie before. And the fact that, again, Mickey Harrison is retweeting Bernie shows you that there's not this great rift between the Heat and Jimmy's camp. There's a disagreement about his value going forward. But to me, Heat fans should take that as a positive. The fact that the owner of the franchise, the one who signs the checks ultimately, is retweeting the agent of the player that they're supposedly in this great dispute with. That's the way, again, knowing the parties involved, that's the way that I view it.
And also, I mean, one of Shams's coworkers basically quote tweeted the idea of the Suns and pretty much shot it down in many ways, where they went over the cap space and just showed that it didn't make a lot of sense for Phoenix to jump in on that. Like they just don't have the money for that. So like there's that element. It was just kind of a funny day in general because it starts out with Jimmy kind of talking to the media finally, and it was like him kind of like doing his usual, just weaving in and out of questions, just like being sarcastic on this one, just kind of and like just get like all the quotes. Like when you write down the quotes, it'll really look like something. But if you sat down and watched the actual interview of Jimmy, uh, he's just messing around. It feels like a lot of his answering, like saying like it doesn't really matter what I say. Because you guys are going to write a different story anyway. And he's just kind of saying the words like, I don't know, who knows. And then people will just quote the who knows or I don't know part. And it looks like, okay, he wants out. He's done with Miami. But in reality, he's just kind of doesn't want to just put anything out there with the media. And you see why, because look what happens later in the day. Media puts out a thing, quoting an agent's name inside the tweet, talking about a team, and everything blew up from there. So it was just kind of funny how the way it happened. And it feels like when everybody's acting like, as you kind of mentioned, Jimmy and his agent are at ends with Miami in the front office. And then Jimmy and his agent are somewhat trolling, and the front office is literally retweeting the tweets of the agent. And it's like, it's just a weird situation. It just feels like nothing has changed. It really does feel that simple because it's kind of the same stuff that we already knew. The reason I just felt like it's a little weirder than we expected is because it's literally December 12th today, as we're kind of pre-shown. It's like maybe January, maybe like if you want to start this stuff, but like early December. And I think the reason why a lot of people were wondering the situation of, if like his agent was really like putting stuff out there was because of the timing of it. Like they finally are playing good basketball. Like they have been a horrible team all season. Just kind of the middle of the pack, and they finally break away, beat three good teams, and they're playing well, and then it comes out. And I think that's why everybody was like, okay, that's it. With the timing of it was a little weird. But I mean, it just feels like a situation, as you kind of have noted, if they do trade him, does a team want to take a swing on him if he's, ultimately going to leave and go to another team if they kind of throw money at him? So there's that element. And number two, if he does go into the offseason, does Miami feel like they have a decent chance of kind of making things right? Because you look at some of these other teams in the cap space they have, is he going to want to go to a bottom feeder team and start over at that age? I don't know. Like you said before, what matters to him most? And it's the money. But is it? I know it always does. And I know he's just kind of being sarcastic about it when he says it doesn't matter the most, because it always really does. But I think to some degree, I don't think it matters as much as it does with other guys we've talked about in the past. Like I do think there's things high up in his order in terms of importance that it may not be just money. I think it is situation. He's kind of mentioned it's about his family and things, and that ties into money, obviously. But I just think it's a weird situation because even if he does go into the offseason, like it's not like a clear indication of what's going to happen. So my whole takeaway on it was it's really early for all this to be happening, and the timing of it was weird. But it is kind of funny just seeing all this blow up in a 48-hour span.
Well, I went back to a podcast we did on this summer, and I predicted that this would happen right after Christmas, that ESPN would get bored, and ultimately this would fill a news cycle. So it was a little earlier than I expected, but again, this was a Tuesday. There was no Laker game and no NFL. I mean that's how I tell you that's how the Heat view it. The Heat view it like they just needed content. Now again, I'm not saying that there's no smoke here. There is smoke here, but the smoke is the same as it's been. Like this is not new smoke. Somebody just didn't light the cigar. Okay, the cigar has been lit since Pat's press conference, and on the day of Pat's press conference, I do know that Jimmy's camp, no matter what was said publicly, was surprised by Pat's tone, and they differed with his view of Jimmy's availability. I know that. We know that. We've reported that. And we've also reported some of these teams that could be potential landing spots. And I've said over and over that I think the most likely team, for a variety of reasons, is Golden State because they have to do right by their star. They should do right by their star. And their owner has been willing to pay deep into the tax before, okay? And it's second apron, all the rest of that. But again, there are real money issues involved here. And I agree with you. I don't think it's just about money for Jimmy, but to me, when you get to this stage, it was told to me this summer it is just about money, but it may not be just totally about money. But okay, money symbolizes respect to certain guys, and I went through the whole Dwayne process in 2016, and he ended up taking less money in Chicago if you factor in taxes. But it looked like more money, and to him, it symbolized respect that the Heat didn't respect him to take care of him early, and that's the currency. Money is the currency that symbolizes respect in the NBA. Okay, and so I do think the money matters, but I don't think he's going to want to go to a bottom feeding situation. To one team that's been mentioned a lot is Brooklyn, and obviously his agent has a relationship with Brooklyn because Ben Simmons is there, and Brooklyn is the name that I keep hearing about as a potential, I don't know, dumping ground for them to get in a deal because they're going to have money. Now, would Jimmy go to Brooklyn? Would he want to go to Brooklyn? Would they extend him? They just did this with older players. Like, are they going to do it again? I mean, he'd be on near Madison Avenue. He's obviously been in a lot of commercials. He could build his business up there. There are reasons to look at it. But again, do I think it makes the most sense for him from a basketball perspective? No, but where he wants to go, he's not a free agent yet. Okay. And like this idea again that he's going to opt out, which has been floated out there. He's going to opt out no matter where he goes, and make him essentially a rental, which actually limits the chance of a trade here because one, um, teams are not going to give up as much to the Heat, which to entice them to make a move now if he's just a rental, right? And secondarily, if he's not going to stay with another team, they'll be less inclined to trade for him. So this is all setting up to kind of prevent a trade from happening. So I don't think any of this until until a team comes out and it's clear that that team is willing to do what the Heat have not yet been willing to do, which is give him the max money he wants. Then to me, this is a non-story. It's not a non-story. I shouldn't say that. It's not an advanced story from where it was. And the only other thing I can share about this is that I know that Bernie made it clear to the Heat the day before he went off on Shams that in his view this was all bullshit. Okay, and he went off on Shams to members of the Heat organization. Now you can say he's covering his ass. I know that's what people have said out there, but again, I'm telling you what the Heat seem to believe it. They seem to believe Bernie, at least the people that I've spoken to so far. So this is all a gossip game that we've just spent another 10 minutes on. But I wanted to get it out there because I just don't. I'm not disrespecting Shams. I know Shams. I like Shams. I'm just saying I don't think there was any there to this report. Even what he said was the Heat are open to listening to offers. I mean, I'm open to listening to offers on pretty much everything in my life, but my direct family. Okay, that doesn't mean anything. Okay, open to listening. It's not even listening to offers. Open to listening to offers. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm open to having a chicken sandwich for lunch. All right. Anyway, on the other side of this, we're going to talk about the basketball part of this with Jimmy. And look, if he's going to be here for the rest of this year, what does that mean? Okay. And how has he played lately? Before we do, I want to mention a great sponsor of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. It's our friend Eric Rubenstein. You should be open to listening to offers of him taking care of you if you have a car accident. 877-829-ERIC. That's 877-829-3742. Grew up in Lauderhill, went to St. Thomas University, magna cum laude. He knows exactly what he's doing when it comes to getting you your money. You have any kind of a car accident, he's the guy to reach out. You can also handle you on slip and falls, all that kind of stuff. But again, we know the streets of South Florida. I mean, look, Brady and I have to drive back to Broward after Heat games, and it's like very rare that we don't see 3 accidents on the road. We know how it is on 9 and 5 and everywhere else. Go to the guy who, again, is going to take care of you the best. That's Eric, also a huge Miami Heat fan. You just check out his Instagram, Attorney Rubenstein. It'll tell you everything you need to know, all the work that he does. He's got a sense of humor, too. Again, he's just the right guy to go to, too, for all of this stuff. EricRubenstein.com. Again, it's Attorney Rubenstein on Twitter or on Instagram, or 877-829-ER. I see. All right. Here's the thing about all of this. Jimmy Butler's been playing better basketball lately. Well, first thing, he's been playing. Let's start there. Okay. And he's been through 3 injuries this year that we know of: the back, the ankle, and the knee. And he has sort of slid into a role here where Tyler Hero is continuing to do his thing, but Jimmy is finding his spots. So how is he doing? Let's start with the offensive end. How has he been doing that?
You mentioned picking his spots, and almost like he's picking his gaps of the game where he feels he's needed. And it's kind of been, and this is why the timing thing I mentioned, because it's not just like Miami's got like 3 fluke wins to me. This is the first time I feel like in the Jimmy Butler era where it's like, okay, Tyler can go get his. Tyler can just go get his number that he's consistently getting. And we've been waiting for that for Jimmy, that have that guy next to him, where Jimmy could kind of sit around, and when Tyler's not in the game, or when Tyler, is not in a flow, then it's like, okay, this is my turn. And it happened a couple of games ago where he kind of went on that 9-0 run himself, like in a minute span, where he got the 3 and 2 and 1s that kind of clutched the game up. That's what they've been missing. And it almost feels like Jimmy's now at a point where they found a lineup that's worked, which, by the way, is the best lineup net rating wise in the entire league, is this starting lineup with Tyler, Duncan, and Haywood next to Jimmy and Bam. Looking at what's like, that lineup signifies what's working for Jimmy, because it's always been shooting next to him. It's always been that. And I mentioned the other day, the best 2-man pairing offensive rating wise is Tyler and Duncan. What's the best 3-man pairing? Jimmy, Tyler, and Duncan. We've talked so much about Bam, Tyler, and Duncan, but Jimmy is kind of the missing piece when it comes to that, because his lanes just open up and allows him to get easier looks. And I was looking at kind of some of the numbers even over this past like 5-game stretch, but let's just go down to the 3 games they've won. He's had 12 shot attempts in all 3 games, and I don't think that's like a coincidence. Like, I think he's figured out, like you said, his role, and it's just consistently coming right now. Like, he's just kind of getting the similar type shots. He's getting to the line a decent bit. He's doing everything you want. It feels like everything's kind of coming together right now. I know his agent put out the we were talking about before, the player efficiency, where he's like top 8, where he's kind of playing like the top 7-8 player in the league right now. And a lot of that, I mean, I think we'd say Tyler's been their best player this season, but a lot of that is because Tyler's playing so well and Jimmy's able to bounce off of that. And we've talked so much about how much Tyler and Jimmy fit. It's looking like it fits pretty well right now when Tyler's playing in that type of mode. So the question becomes, how is this going to loom over, like with all this trade rumor stuff? Like, is it going to loom over in a negative sense? I just don't get that feeling. Like, I don't know if you feel differently. Like, it feels like a situation where almost Jimmy will feed off it more because he's just a troll. And once he sees people start talking about him like this, and once he sees his name in the national space, it's like, okay, now I'm going to go play really hard for the Miami Heat because everybody thinks I want to leave. Because he's just going to negate and go in the opposite direction. But I was going to ask you, because we were talking about doing this podcast. I'm like, what do you think is the main difference of team sense, locker room sense, with something linger over with the Jimmy trade discussions? Because it is national, a little more national than the Tyler one was, compared to when there was the Tyler trade rumors midseason. Like, what do you think? What do you think that does for a team difference was?
It's a good question. And I want to give one more stat before I answer the question, because you mentioned Bernie putting out the 8th in efficiency. Chris Brickley, who's Jimmy's trainer, put out in a couple of days. The last 5 games, Jimmy has been averaging 20 points on 63% from the field, 50% from 3, 82% from the line. On the year, JB is shooting a career best 55.7%. A season is a journey. The grind continues. I actually think that this is less of an issue even than the Tyler thing, which we didn't think was going to be an issue, and we were right about that. And the reason I think so is that Jimmy has the ability to make everything a joke, and we see that in the locker room all the time, and so I can't see it getting heavy. I don't. And I watched the interaction between him and his teammates, and I think he likes them genuinely. Genuinely, I saw it in the Bahamas, and when we don't get a lot of glimpses, anymore. But in the locker room, when you see it, I don't think there's tension between him and his teammates. The one thing that's been up and down sort of over the years now, look, him and Bam, and we've talked about this, have never been like the duo that goes to dinner on the road. It's just not. There's certain duos in the league that do that. There's certain that never did. That's just not. They're very different personalities in that regard. The one relationship that I've always kind of watched with Jimmy though was the Tyler one, because if you go back to the very beginning, and I wrote about this at the time when Tyler was drafted. Jimmy invited Tyler to his house in Chicago, and not only did he invite him up there to stay with him and work out with him, but Jimmy I guess, was closing on a property in South Florida. Tyler told me this story, and he was closing on a property in South Florida, and had Tyler come down with him, basically. To the closing of the property, okay, and then we saw the Tyler Tuesday thing, and then we saw a lot of that stuff kind of stop, right? And then there's all the things behind the scenes about like what kind of players Jimmy might want to play with or might not want to play with. And it looked like, again, that Tyler's timeline was not matching up with Jimmy's. And it may end up being the case that by the time Tyler has figured it out, Jimmy was too far past his prime to. And we saw this with Timmy and Zoe. We saw it with the Dolphins, with Zach and Jason getting drafted when Dan Marino was too old. This sort of stuff happens where timelines don't match up exactly. But I'll just tell you, with Jimmy and Tyler this year, like every interaction I see with the two of them this year, they're laughing. Like every single one. Like it just seems like they're. I don't get the sense, and maybe I'll be proven wrong on this, but I don't get the sense that Jimmy is resentful of Tyler's increased role. I don't. Okay, that's something we've been watching. You don't see it either. I don't think Alex sees it. I haven't heard any of that, and you said it. We've kind of been waiting for Jimmy to be able to take a step back a little bit. I don't think he necessarily minds that. I do think he wants the shots in the clutch. I do think if there's one thing he would want, it's to be the guy they go to down there. And so maybe there may end up being a little bit of conflict in that area. But I think in general, he wants other guys to kind of carry parts of the game. And the fact that Tyler can do it efficiently now, where you and I are not sitting there. I think the other night was the one time where we're like, get Jimmy back in the damn game. Like in the fourth quarter, where Spo's always waiting, and then Jimmy sits between like the 8.5 minute mark and the 6 minute mark until he finally gets in because he's sitting at the scores table. There's only been a couple games this year where we really said that, because Tyler, when he's been in there for the fourth quarter, has been able to manage those minutes as their offensive fulcrum. But to get to your question, I don't really think it'll be an issue. Because, and here's the core thing, and this gets back to what we talked about in the first part of this episode. What is his motivation? Well, it's to win a championship, obviously, right? Can he do that with this particular Heat team? Probably not. But the other motivation is he wants his money. And the better he plays, the more money he's going to get. Like, no team is going to even consider giving him the max if he's missing half the games and sort of lollygagging through them like he did in the Charlotte game on the second night of that back-to-back. If that's going to be the norm, it's not just going to be the Heat that's going to pull back from him. It's going to be other teams. So he has a reason. He has a cause to use this as fuel to say, give me my MF and money. Okay. Whether it's the Heat or somebody else, this is the kind of player he is. This is the kind of person he is. So I just don't see any of this. People like this is a distraction for the Heat. And Spo loves this shit. So I mean, he talks about narratives and with noise and all the rest of this stuff. Trust me. Okay. He went through the big three era. Okay. Bumpgate, Cablegate. Literally, there was a day's worth of stories because Chris Bosh said they didn't have the good cable in Toronto. Okay, he said this at a shoot-around before they played the Raptors, and so he couldn't get Game of Thrones. Okay, that literally was a story. Okay, Crygate. Which players were crying in the locker room after they lost to Chicago? We had like gate after gate after gate after gate after gate, and Spo had to deal with all that stuff. This Jimmy trade stuff for Spo is like he said, this is a Tuesday. Today's Thursday, but it's like a regular Tuesday for the Miami Heat. So I don't know. Do you feel differently? Like, do you think this is going to affect Jimmy and the team negatively? Because I don't.
I don't think so. I just think the Tyler situation felt honestly more realistic. Where like if like the locker room hears that story and hears about them trying to cash in Tyler at the time for one of those big name players that we did 75 podcasts on. Like it just felt a little more realistic that it's like, okay, this could actually happen if they really do push their chips to the table. Whereas this, is your literal franchise best player at the time. It just feels like Jimmy can, as you mentioned, I really do think the personality thing fits into this because Jimmy can kind of shape the narrative how he wants, whereas Tyler, I don't think Tyler was head on addressing it every day. Whereas Jimmy will. Like Jimmy will make comments about it constantly. He'll make jokes about it and kind of make it lighthearted. Where this probably won't be talked about by honestly probably by the weekend. Like this is going to be one of those things where we're all talking about constantly and waiting to see if he walks in the arena tonight with orange hair, with the trend going on with the teams that he's listed in. But I really don't think so. I think this is a totally different situation. It's just different because he's a free agent in the offseason. That's the only difference. Because ultimately, always before when we were talking about Tyler, it was like, okay, as you said before, the quote's still here. Like Tyler was still here even if they didn't make the trade past the deadline. Whereas this time, it's kind of lingering a little further past the deadline. Usually, it's like, okay, you can kind of drop your shoulders a little bit once that date goes past. But now it's like, okay, now stuff gets real if we don't go on a run if they don't make the trade. So that's the only difference I can really see. But I think tonight is a good example of he needs kind of a decent response to this to kind of show. You said what does he need to do? I don't think it really is anything on the basketball court. I just think he needs to be engaged, and I think he needs to be in the way that he's been this season. Nothing different. He's been engaged this season. And that's been the big difference to me. In the regular season, he's played. Whether it's jumping passing lanes on defense, whether it's drawing in ones, screaming into the crowd, hyping up teammates, doing all this stuff. Like he needs to kind of just be like that, engaged with his teammates to really make the vibes not there. Like if it's a consistent, like after this report goes out there and it's like that game against you mentioned in Charlotte where it's like he's just not really engaged, then you could see problems creeping up where it's like guys in the locker room start thinking about it. But I just don't think that's going to happen. I think he's really found a trend right now where like you said, he's found his role, and Tyler playing well. I think that's energized them. Like if Tyler didn't make this type of leap this season, I think you could see him slowly. I won't say checking out because he would have had to play well for his contract, as you mentioned.
Right.
But I think there would have been something in the back of his head with this team where the Tyler jump has given him a little life to these games because he's just played at such a different level than he has. So he just has to be engaged. He has to be engaged with the team just to keep these guys together. Because look, Miami, if they win tonight and they're on a 4-game streak here, I mean, that's pretty big for this team. This was a tough stretch that we were talking about. And I know like we're talking so big picture. It feels like this last week, but it's kind of really in the present right now that if they can make a run and be in this mix of a top 4 seed, like we're talking about things a little differently.
Well, I almost forgot there was a basketball season. I mean, that's the way the last few days have been. It's like, oh, and now they have a game they weren't, again, wasn't on the initial schedule, but then they get Detroit. These are winnable. You could get to 14-10 potentially, and then yes, you got to deal with OKC, which is loaded and still playing at a high level without Chet, but then you get Orlando that doesn't have Franz right now, and I don't even know what Paulo's status is going to be, and then you get the Nets. Like there is an opportunity here, exception that OKC game, to go on a little bit of a run. And also the other part of this, and we've talked about this, the way the schedule has set up has played into Jimmy's hands because he had 2 of his best games after long rest. One was coming off the injury where he missed some time. And the other one was as we called it, was the Shakira break, right? Like where they had the 5 days off. And he came out like guns blazing, like right after that. And now he's had another long break and he's heard his name in the news. And I would be very surprised if he doesn't play well tonight. I would. And look, playing well for him is not like what he was doing in the playoffs a couple of years ago. That's not it. It is finding these spots where he can settle them and really kind of take over when it's necessary, or when teams are overloading Tyler, which is going to start happening now. Now the other piece to this is when does Bam start to develop consistent offense? But there's been some signs lately. There's been more dunks. There's been him stepping more into the mid range. There's been some more positive stuff, and then they have found some rotation pieces. And we did the interview with Drew Smith. I recommend everybody listen to that. I think people will have a lot of respect for Drew after they hear it. I want to throw nickname possibilities at him tonight because that we took that, and we didn't really get a good one, but I don't think he's going to go by Drewski. Or what was it, Mountain Drew? There are a bunch of them that we got. Somebody did a chat GPT and gave us like 45 options for Drew. I'm not sure which one he's going to pick, but we're going to give him to him. But they found a formula with surrounding these 3 guys with glue. essentially. I mean, Duncan is their offensive glue, and he is completely necessary to unlocking things, as you've talked about. But their defensive glue is basically Highsmith and Drew Smith. And other guys are kind of being left on the wayside right now, whether it's, Jovic, to some degree, Jaquez. We're going to see what happens with Larson's availability and whether he gets back in the mix here. But they have found something. It does not mean they're championship contenders, but I also don't think this thing is just going to go off the rails because of Jimmy's situation. I actually think that uh, I think it's a positive catalyst in some senses for them in a weird way. But I'll just go to this on it before we close here. And by the way, we're going to do we had a sponsor corner segment with our friend Javier at Real Estate Shop is going to actually close this episode. Did this a couple of days ago. Then when all the Jimmy stuff broke, but I wanted to get in with it and talk to him about Tyler. By the way, he's the guy who said that Drew Smith should be starting. He said that 3 weeks ago. He's not that far off at this point. But Brady, I mean, I guess as we finish here, I mean, we have to reclassify what it is that Jimmy needs to be to this team, right? Like he does. I mean, firstly, he's not going to get to a superstar level consistently, right? We're in agreement on that. Like at age 35, not in the regular season for sure.
No, not in the regular.
Okay, so is this enough? I mean, what he's doing now, just highly efficient. Shot attempts have been, like you said, basically a dozen per game. Try to get to the line 8 to 10 times. Make more of his free throws than he was making earlier in the season. And then I guess in jumping passing lanes and picking up a steal and a half. Like, is this with what Tyler's doing? Is this enough to move them into the top 4 or 5 in the East and stay there?
Definitely, I think so. I mean, we've talked about so much about these guys that cut out mid ranges, and I don't think we've talked enough about him. He's turned a lot of this into more layups, and I didn't think we'd be talking about that with Jimmy. I didn't think we'd be saying that he'd be a guy that'd see an uptick there because that's kind of his old game, and teams kind of rally around stopping that. But like I've said about.
Oh, you hit mute. Go ahead. Oh, he's still muted. I didn't do that intentionally. I think I know where you were going. I think I know where you're going. And we'll get to it on. This is a good primer for us to tell you to go to Off the Floor. Brady is going to finish this thought on Off the Floor. Click on the description. I don't know what happened to your mic. Click on the description. Click on the link. Sign up. You'll be grateful that Brady just lost sound. Did you get it back? Yes. No. No. I still see the mic off. All right. We're going to go to our sponsor corner segment now. I'm not going to say that Javier is a suitable replacement for Brady, but he is a sponsor, and in real estate, he probably would do a better job helping you buy or sell your house. So check it out. This is our latest sponsor corner with Javier Iglesias.